Welcome back to the channel. This is Ready Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto traveled back in time for Hinata. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Always taking no more time. Let's start the story.
Jiraiya placed a heavy hand on Naruto's shoulder and dug his fingers into him. You know the Rasengan, you know sealing, and now you know a secret about the village that I didn't know before you just said it, she said. Who are you? Furthermore, Naruto had always enjoyed pulling practical jokes. I'm the son of the Yondaime Hokage Konoha's #1 unpredictable ninja. Jiraiya raised his hands in the air and roared, so all this time, you knew? About everything? Naruto spat and wrapped Hinata in a blanket, asking, could you not yell? He was completely clueless about what to do about the Jupiter-sized lump on her forehead. He wasn't even sure if he ought to wake her. Itachi inquired, what is your plan of action? He was sitting by his brother's bedside, taking in a rare moment of quiet, while he watched Naruto fuss over his girlfriend. Sasuke's fussing had been left to his older brother by the genin. Itachi was surprisingly good at fussing. I needed Tsunade to become Hokage under her. I could have taken a mission to go after Akatsuki and put an end to this in aim before it went too far over there. Then I'd warn the other Jinchuriki about Madara's plan. Madara Uchiha? Inquired Jiraiya. Yeah, the Madara Uchiha that was supposed to have died in an epic battle over 100 years ago? Yeah, just checking. Naruto breathed deeply. Anyway, without her as my leader, no one will legally let me take that mission. What makes you think she would have given it to you? I would have fessed up. She knew my parents a bit. She'd probably be convinced if I showed her what I could do, but if she didn't I'd have to go missing. Nin. No, Jiraiya's expression darkened. You have no idea how messed up everything is about to get. Itachi, tell him. Exclaimed Naruto, raising his arms in defense. It's the only way. With caution, the Uchiha observed him and said, everything you've told us makes sense, though I can't understand how you found out about it. Naruto grumbled, big, furry thing? Lives in my stomach? Smart enough to put 2 and 2 together and give me a leg up in life at an early age so that it doesn't die? There are holes in that story, Itachi said, shaking his head. Naruto spit out, screw the holes, and slammed his fist into the headboard, causing it to smoke due to the corrosive chakra. It wasn't just him who was getting angry. I'm trying to save the life of someone important to me. Same reason you became a missing nin. Calm the hell down, Jiraiya commanded. You're in no position to be throwing a temper tantrum. Kyuubi's Jinchuriki leaves the village. We're obligated to go after him. Matter of national security. Naruto became enraged. This is a matter of international security. You're not helping yourself by arguing, kid, or by letting cute and fuzzy out to play. The fox's chakra was under the control of the demon container. Inhaled deeply. Itachi pointedly questioned, and Hinata? How will she react when she finds out that her boyfriend has left her home? Sighing, Naruto said, I don't know. Her safety's most important, though. After giving a nod, Itachi moved the compress around Sasuke's head. It appeared as though Jiraiya would begin banging his head against a wall. No, you. He pointed to Naruto. Are going to sit your ass down, wait for your friends to wake up, and then come back home with me. You. He pointed to Itachi. Consign yourself up for a toad summoning contract and begin submitting regular reports to myself about Akatsuki's behavior. You're not getting it, Ero Sennin, said Naruto. This has to be done with or without your approval. I'll take my name being dragged through the mud to ensure my village is safe. Jiraiya inhaled deeply. You are not becoming a missing nin. Naruto exclaimed, you're not my damn guardian. When he realized how that sounded, he decided he might as well finish the act of a 12-year-old and leapt out of the window. Hinata limped up to him and said, I don't know what happened, exactly, but I'm here if you want to talk. The bastard sent you to get me? The blonde said, taking a guilty breath. Me and Sasuke, she said, leaning against him and taking his arm around her waist. I just found you first. Then they fell silent. She raised her head and Naruto's mouth found her cheek, making their lips meet. It was essentially the date they had been hoping for last night. The street was on the outskirts of town. Nobody was around, and the sun was setting, using chakra to lift her up and over the railing around the roof of the closest building. He inhaled through his nose here. The likelihood of someone snooping them is even lower. Before backing up into the siding and allowing him to steady himself with hands on either side of her, Hinata put her hands to his face and drew him down to her. This was ideal, even though the breeze was blowing her hair in his face and the sun was shining in his eyes. With hands moving down his neck and front, the kunoichi arched into him. He imitated her by grabbing her hips and untying the wrap she had worn to reveal his favorite tank top. She unzipped his jacket and moved her hands over his torso. He simply breathed her in as Hinata sucked lightly on his lip before moving to his neck to kiss and nibble down his collar. Her lips found his ear and said, Naruto, tell me what happened. He said, I can't, and once more found her mouth. He was unable to inform her not at all. She walked away. You keep a lot of secrets from me. I think you trust me, but... He looked at Hinata and said, please don't ask, Hinata. But I worry, because Jiraiya-sama said that you wanted to leave. She bit her lip and began to cry. I know Naruto-kun does everything for the best, and that he saved my life during the invasion and helped me become so much more, she stammered. Naruto stopped during the mission to Wave. He was precisely where he was. Hinata was still reliant on him, regardless of how strong she had become, how she could confront Neji, Tsunade, and her family, and how she could blindly walk into the path of an S-ranked criminal. Seeing this woman so desperate for his approval and presence was disastrous and terrifying. He recalled her as shy, strong, and firm, and he recalled a fight with her in which she nearly lost her temper. But she had never broken. Was this spark less Hinata? Not with her own fire will? He was also unable to stop here, backing off and telling her she was strong enough on her own, or perhaps leaving and letting her bear the consequences would have been preferable. God, Hinata, needing someone this much? And use the strength she had previously displayed to put herself back together, but he didn't. He took hold of her and dragged her down onto the roof with him. He wiped away her tears and muttered, not you, I would never, ever leave you. At that moment, she was entirely his. He planted kisses on her jaw, neck, solar plexus, ribs, between her breasts, just above the navel, over her heart, and back up to her lips. She remained motionless. He had never touched her in such a way or gone farther than he had anticipated, making her feel uneasy. But now she was merely staring at him and, my goodness, kissing him back, tugging at his hair, and putting her legs around his middle. It felt wonderful to have her this close. Then he noticed that this body was 12, just like Hinata's, and wasn't yet accustomed to this level of stimulation. He scurried away from her and sat almost a foot away, tying his jacket around his waist to try to conceal the evidence of their activities. Hinata's situation was slightly less complicated than his because her shirt was longer and the moisture was hidden in an inconspicuous location. For a moment, he was unable to think. He was only breathing heavily and looking at the floor. He then tensed up when she walked over to him, sat down in his lap, and planted another passionate kiss on him. No animosity. Nevertheless, I'm sorry, I'm not, she said, no longer crying, but still sniffing a little. I love you. I love you, too, he replied. I'm sorry you keep having to put up with this shit. She kissed him once more and shook her head. He tucked his chin over her head and broke the kiss. The sun had set. It was simply cold now. A clone was talking to Tsunade about his defection somewhere in the village. Another was talking to Itachi Uchiha about Madara's plan. He was no longer a Konoha nin. But no one else was aware of this yet. He could wait a bit longer, though. For Hinata. A gentle push against her cheek with her eyes still closed. Hinata turned and looked for the owner's lips before smiling gently into the kiss. She shifted, trying to find a comfortable spot on the wall she had dozed off against, trying to make the most of the warmth the night would provide. Wrapped in a jacket that hadn't been cooled by the morning air, she exhaled, "NKU cold." She was kissed again on the temple and went back to sleep. Anyone would be suspicious of three women traveling the countryside alone. In fact, it was blatantly ninja. But to people who were unaware of these things, the three women were just another group of faces that were easily forgotten. A set of breasts like Tsunade's, however, would not soon be forgotten by the local men, as any lecher would know. The elderly man laughed and said, and her nieces. MMPH, damn fine, for an older woman. Jiraiya grinned and said, thank you, before punching the pervert in the stomach. Taking out a Konoha forehead protector with a slash cut through the design of the village, he said, they're runaways of your military, citizen. Now, if you want to keep whatever you've got on you, you'll tell me which way they went. The man's eyes shifted nervously to the two children who were with the white-haired man, and he quickly confessed anything he knew about the three. With a hand that was always at his belt, probably on a weapon, Sasuke had a murderous appearance. Hinata, the other, appeared as though she might burst into tears at any second with the exception of the slash. Both wore the same forehead protector that the white-haired ninja was bobbing up and down, so if he tried anything, he could probably be counted on to kick his ass as well as the senior, not that he was that stupid. For the most part, Hinata simply tried not to cry. She didn't want to put Sasuke through another panic attack because he had already done a good job of talking her out of one this morning. He felt uneasy around her and her tears, even though she had spent more time with him than most of the other girls in the village. Sakura excluded. In addition, he was rough in his consolation and would likely resort to slapping her to wakefulness if she persisted. Naruto was gone. He had abandoned her. He left immediately after assuring her that he would stay, and she couldn't figure out why. For whatever reason, Jiraiya had warned them both that Naruto might go missing. She had been shocked by the news, but she had also observed that the Avengers' response was nothing short of stupefied. The majority of the time, Hinata knew Naruto was adamant that Sasuke would eventually desert the leaf. She was also aware of his sincere attempts to stop that from occurring, which included intensive training, team building, and careful guidance in the direction that would best serve the Avenger as Naruto understood it. Furthermore, Naruto was more knowledgeable than most people. Even when she believed she had no chance, he had been the one to train with her. She hadn't been aware of it, but she had admitted during the tests that she had grown more confident since they had begun dating. Her stutter was mostly gone, and she straightened up because Naruto wouldn't want her to slouch. She was still shy and embarrassed when everyone was staring at her, but her posture had greatly improved when someone made a mistake or made a decision that was a bit too hasty for Hinata. She didn't hesitate to correct them because she could now look them in the eye. Her first kiss had been Naruto. Naruto had revealed his greatest secret to her and planted a kiss on her right there in that shadowy training area. Surrounded by dewy grass and prickly bushes, she moved, clutching her arms, burying her nose in his jacket collar while feigning to look to her right. His scent was still there like a boy in soap. They then used that field for training. On numerous occasions, Hinata had been pushed against a tree and kissed without reason, and his hands had driven her to an entirely unfair distraction. He would try to kick her head for several minutes and succeed a few times, or he would pin her arms up next to her and tickle her neck, only to be released when her heart rate had stabilized and she had had enough time to dodge before a chakra-charged fist landed where she had been. They would then return home. She had recently begun to stay over and sleep on his cozy mattress with him. He was a cuddler. She might wake up to find him half on top of her after he pulled her over onto his chest, or curled up against her so they were nestled like spoons. She had previously woken up by herself as usual. I was prepared to get ready by myself, but he surprised me in the kitchen with mini hot dogs, scrambled eggs, and instant donuts that smelled like sugar and cocoa on the coffee table. As the gutsy ninja, it was very homely, as if she could grow accustomed to him complaining that she needed to help him remove a stain from his shirt, or that, at the end of the day, she had to put her shoes next to his. She had also grown accustomed to it. While he washed his hair, he sang the same 3 lines of a song he refused to learn the lyrics to, or he kissed her cheek and gave her an unexpected side hug. She missed it, and it hadn't even been a day yet. She would return home to an empty apartment. If they couldn't locate him and bring him back, nothing, in her opinion, could feel worse. She discovered the source of the worsening sensation. It could feel worse to track Naruto herself while he was trying his hardest to hide from her. It could hurt to discover that the henge he had adopted also squinted her eyes the way he did when he was angry. It was awful to watch him set 2 traps on Jiraiya and Sasuke, then feel their gazes on her as Naruto approached her. Naruto. She failed to shed a tear. The henge vanished, leaving only him in his white shirt, wearing a dejected expression, and saying, "Hinata." His arms reached out to her, crushing her to his chest, his fingers in her hair, his mouth on her eyes, cheeks, and lips, and his entire front against her entire front, leaving him completely vulnerable to her gentle fist. However, she was unable to. Neji would undoubtedly be pleased to learn that despite her efforts to become a proficient kunoichi, she was unable to fulfill her duty and stop a missing nin. Instead, in a desperate attempt to get him to reconsider, she gripped his shirt and gave him a passionate kiss while pressing against him what they had done on the roof. Did he want more? It was all right. She would not that she would mind if it was Naruto. Did he want her body? He possessed it. But don't leave, please. He said, "I'll be back," in between kisses. Number. You can't let this hold you back. No, I'll miss you. Don't abandon me. Then, I'll think of you every day. Every hour, you will be on my mind. I will always be called to duty because you turned me into a ninja. Remember what we talked about. You have to become the Hyuga head. It's the only way to change things around with the Hyuga clan. You have to keep going, keep training. I'll do it if you want me to. However, it will not occur as it would if you were present to assist. You're amazing, Hinata. You're strong and smart and beautiful, and I'm absolutely in love with you. You have my undying love. Please forgive me. No, I don't get it. Before I forgive you, you must explain why. She could only stand there, let him kiss her, and feel his words reverberate because none of the words would come. It was illogical. It was all illogical. Why would Naruto simply walk away? Why don't you show her why or explain first? If he explained, she could comprehend. Then, much to her surprise, she became angry. He didn't trust her. Why? Why wouldn't he tell her rather than fleeing? Didn't everything she had done, including the wave mission, the test, and the curse seal, show how far she was prepared to go for him? Why wouldn't he simply put his trust in her? Her Byakugan caught it just as she was about to give him a piece of her mind after her fingers swiftly blocked his chakra pathways, causing him to stiffen. After learning that the Kyuubi was inside Naruto, she had not been as afraid of them as she had anticipated, but now she was beginning to understand why they were so sought after. A Naruto was canceling out the gentle fist. The demon's chakra was causing the blocked arteries to burst open, and all she could do was watch as Naruto casually rendered the only fighting style she was familiar with completely ineffective. The blonde sagged against Naruto as the fast-acting drug coating had took effect, unable to avoid the senbon that sailed past him from Tsunade's apprentice and settled into her left hip. She forced herself to look him in the eyes and muttered, "I won't forget." She could tell whether that was what he had done, what they had intended for her to do with regard to her clan, or simply the rage that was growing inside of her at Naruto and his occasionally foolish behavior. Then she lost consciousness. Hinata sobbed for a while when she returned to their empty apartment. She sobbed when her shampoo ran out and she had to use Naruto's. She sobbed his scent surrounded her as she dozed off in his bed, causing her to cry so deeply and for such a long time that she felt lightheaded when she opened a training scroll to discover a positive note from him encouraging her to fight Neji during the exam, and when she saw his shelf of ramen in the morning, she started crying. She had to meet with her team to train that morning on the third day since she could no longer claim to be recuperating from her injury. She came with Naruto's abandoned forehead protector in her pocket and one of his shirts underneath her old, heavy jacket for her sake. Kiba vowed to drag Naruto's dumb ass back to Konoha. Shino consoled him in silence. Kurenai apologized for what had happened to her and offered to let her stay at Naruto's apartment or at home if she didn't want to live there. Hinata refused and, in spite of her throbbing headache, stiffly went through the motions of training. She started unpacking the items she and Naruto had brought on the mission. On the fourth day she was about to prepare her own lunch when Sasuke and Sakura stopped by. The three of them sat glumly at Naruto's table in his kitchen and gulped down Naruto's ramen. With a final, "You can't do this," Sasuke put down his chopsticks. "Even if he's gone insane, he wouldn't want you to be upset over this." Hinata asked blankly, "Am I supposed to be something else?" "The last thing he said to you was that he didn't want you to let this hold you back," replied the Uchiha. "If you're upset with him, don't let him get to you. If you're in love with him, then listen to what he told you." Hinata's face remained unchanged. "I'm both," Sasuke said. Hinata, sounding a little more uncomfortable, "We understand how you feel, Naruto. You lost a boyfriend, and we lost a teammate. However, you must remain strong for the sake of your village." Hinata stated, "He was my strength," with a hint of force. "Did you pay attention to anyone back at the academy? I was pathetic. I couldn't fight. I stuttered all the time, couldn't keep eye contact." Sakura said, "And look at you now," grinning at the girl with the dark hair. A Sharingan user snorted at her teasing, saying, "You charged an S-class nin head-on. You defeated your cousin, last year's Rookie of the Year, who had a full year of field experience over you, in battle. You can stare down Sasuke Uchiha." Hinata protested, "Because Naruto was there. Naruto's the reason for all of these things. He's been behind everything I've done since we graduated." "Not everything," Sakura said softly. "That's all you did to not go after him." Hinata froze. "You followed him to wave," Sasuke said, recalling the first C rank for Team 7. "And this time, you let him go," Sakura said with wisdom, "and that takes strength and courage and not just belief in Naruto's belief in you. You had to believe in yourself to do that." Hinata searched for the feeling she had for Naruto. She really missed him. She hadn't experienced this low since they started dating, but she knew that his steady arms would be there to help her feel better if it happened. She was aware that his actions were, in some way, beneficial. She had no idea how or why, but he would not act without cause, and he would undoubtedly have a good one. And beneath that, beneath the blind faith, the pressing into vertical surfaces, and the desire for his kisses, there was anger. Hadn't she followed his instructions? Despite his secrecy, hadn't she shown that she would remain faithful to him? Did he think she didn't love him back for some reason? Could she do anything else? "I'd hate to disappoint him," Hinata said, her eyes hardening. "He wanted me to become Hyuga head." Sakura grinned broadly, and Sasuke appeared as optimistic as an Avenger could appear. "That's a start." "Naruto always has a plan," Sasuke stated, "and he always stuck with Kakashi's. Those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash." Saying he hasn't abandoned us. "Naruto wanted me to become a medic, and he had a point," Sakura stated. "I've been making good progress since I got started." Sasuke thought, he had a point with sealing, too. Hinata said sourly, "But he's an idiot," and the other two appeared taken aback. "Maybe he somehow knows exactly what we're capable of, and maybe he's a genius fighter or leader, but he should tell us when he has a plan. He can't just go off by himself." The Hyuga's expression was reflected in Sasuke's. "We'll get him back." "In the meantime," Sakura said, firmly clasping her hands together, "he left us jobs." With a nod, Sasuke stood up. Sakura trailed behind, determined to spend the remainder of the day in a training field, getting sweaty, sore, and dirty. After taking off her heavy tan jacket and putting on Naruto's orange one, Hinata pursued her. The feelings Hinata had for Naruto were not accepted by the Hyuga. In contrast to the crisp pastels they preferred, the Hyuga disapproved of the way she wore his jacket around when she returned to the compound. The Hyuga had conflicting emotions. Were they relieved to get rid of a failure or horrified by her cohabitation with the demon brat? Over the course of nearly 10 months, these feelings subsided because Hinata was no longer a failure. She would eventually have to stop wearing that orange eyesore, and Naruto's absence caused the public to quickly forget his reputation. Nobody could deny Hinata's intense training. Her teachers were still in awe of her rapid development and quick thinking. Even though they were embarrassed that she was requesting non-Juken techniques, she consistently beat Hanabi back and, for the most part, kept up with Neji. This was not the 12-year-old who was afraid of her own shadow and was unable to defeat her younger sister. Hinata was friendly. Of course, she was adored by the branch house kids, and she quickly became friends with Akemi, a cousin who was a new genin kunoichi. She now forced her sister to bond with her by taking her shopping multiple times a month. Well, Hanabi shopped. Hinata mainly tried things on and put them back. She used all of her money to pay for Naruto's apartment. She even occasionally had fairly pleasant conversations with Neji. The Hyuga reluctantly gave their approval. Must you always wear that thing? He's been marked for death for at least a year now. Why does it matter to you? The Hyuga do not need to be associated with Uzumaki. Even if Naruto is a missing nin, he changed me for the better. This is a reminder. There was a harsh, disapproving silence. In response, Hinata stepped aside. It's late. Where are you going? Turning, Hinata bowed respectfully. Oto-sama, I am going to return Naruto-san's jacket to his apartment. I've outgrown it, so it's better to keep it with his other things, now. May I accompany you? Hinata paused. Of course. With a nod, Hiyashi stepped down next to her. You have changed much since your academy years. Thank you, and I've had ample opportunity to guess at the cause. Sensing his gaze on the jacket, Hinata shifted it to her other hand, away from him, as if he might grab it. Hiyashi let out a sigh. You will be going to your second Chunin exam soon, will you not? She replied, yes, in grass. There was a brief silence from the Hyuga head. Naruto Uzumaki is not your hero, do you understand? The sacrifice he made at the time of his birth. Hinata inhaled deeply. It could be argued that he is the village's savior, but he is not your hero. Naruto Uzumaki never once did anything for you. Hiyashi continued, you are not indebted to him. I am glad you seem to know this now. Never once. Hinata said in an incomprehensible voice. How about when I beat Neji? Or all the times we spent training? True, Uzumaki somehow tapped the potential that we thought you had none of, Hiyashi conceded, but the training offered by a genin, even one with his capacity for power. Hinata, that's not it, shook her head. At all, Naruto was my teacher. He was my friend. ILO. Though it appeared that her father could easily guess what that L word was, she was unable to tell him just yet. Uzumaki Naruto has abandoned the village hidden in the leaves, Hiyashi stated. He hasn't abandoned anything. Abandoning would mean he has no intention of seeing this place again. You cannot expect that he would return to you, was the best way for Hinata to describe her father's expression, but Hyuga as a whole didn't gape. She gave a nod for a moment. She was afraid that he might hit her and wondered how she should respond if he did. The emotion on his face vanished. She blurted out, and not to me, and then flinched at the stutter. She reiterated, not to me, adding, at least, not just for me. Hey, Naruto-kun always has a plan. The person he's currently on the run with is Tsunade of the Sanin Jiraiya-sama has hinted that Naruto's gone for some reason of his own, and I don't find that difficult to believe. Naruto will return to this village and Thena. And then? Hiyashi asked, raising an eyebrow. Hinata sighed and steadily looked into her father's eyes. Naruto gave me the task of becoming Hyuga head in the meantime, and I would rather lose my eyes than disappoint him, she said. Her blood was rushing in her ears, and she could hear it. Hinata staggered after her father, who remained silent and simply kept walking in the direction of Naruto's apartment. It was strange to have her father in their apartment. Photographs of Naruto and Hinata were also present. There were only two, but they were prominently displayed, and when Hinata paused to gaze at them, he tensed up a little. She folded the shirt once more and placed it in Naruto's closet before going back to the living room to ask her father if he would like to have tea before they left. This was an attempt to rekindle their father-daughter bond, or at the very least, to put together the kind of relationship she would need to succeed him. She was shocked to see that he had taken the picture of Naruto and Hinata off the wall and was staring at it with bloodline activity. Hinata, he replied, have you used the Byakugan inside the apartment? She sighed. No, well, once or twice, maybe, when I was looking for something. Hiyashi pulled out the photograph after flipping it over and removing the back of the frame. A black seal was lightly painted on the back to prevent it from showing through to the front. Hinata's throat tightened with breath. She took it right away and charged it with chakra, even though she didn't recognize anything on it other than the fact that it wasn't an exploding tag. Nothing took place. Her father said, perhaps blood? with a cunning look on his face. She pulled out a kunai, cut it across her thumb, and then touched the paper with it. Poof! Young looking, but not at all diminutive, the toad gave them a blink. He said, "Hello? I'm Gamakichi. Ya got any snacks?" Too many visions of the elderly Hinata, too many fantasies of white eyes crinkling with joy, long, dark, sweet-smelling hair, smooth skin, clean fingers and the way they moved over his flesh, and pearly teeth vanishing behind a mysterious smile, the sensation of touching her. He thought she was beside him too frequently when he woke up, and Kyuubi hissed at him for using his emotion-driven chakra without a good reason. Too many fantasies about waking up beside her. Although he was never asleep for long, she always woke up before him. In the mornings, she had to force herself to separate from him because of his propensity to cling to her while he slept. There were too many fantasies about kissing her, to move his hands over her body, to feel her tugging on his hair, to taste her mouth, to feel her breath in his ear, to feel her breasts press against his chest. Do you like that, Naruto-kun? I dreamed too much about her in his lap, with her legs crossed firmly behind his back, her hips rolling in time with his, her neck flushed, and her face smiling wickedly. Too many dreams involving the most foolish topics, and what should I have done? Even if I hadn't been seeking him out, it's my duty as a ninja to apprehend missing nin. He had yelled, while she hissed back, when it comes to you and Sasuke, nothing is about duty. The argument was about whether or not his previous battle with Sasuke had been justified. The moment he had almost severed her finger with a badly aimed Rasengan, and the brief panic attack that followed the one time she came in to get nail polish and saw him masturbating in the shower. After the first week, Tsunade had had enough of his whining and tried to keep him occupied even during their journey by having him recite names of old village leaders, poisons, and important facts, anything that kept him from looking like a run-over dog. He created clones, left them in locations to practice for him as he walked, and then attempted to extract additional skills from the two kunoichi. Even though his poor chakra control prevented him from using most of their jutsu, it wasn't particularly difficult. This Hinata crossed his mind, how reliant she was, how dissimilar in her rapid development and contradictory dependence on him, how, despite her uniqueness, she was able to arouse in him the same protective, lustful, and proud desires that she had always done. He tried his best to stop thinking about her. He couldn't do much to make Tsunade laugh, however, unless they were also somewhat deranged, like Kakashi. They would usually not comply once they discovered that you have been hiding your feelings. The secret was revealed the night he met Tsunade, which was a record, if you didn't include Neji. She was aware that he was also fleeing Konoha and that he maintained communication with a person who had massacred one of the most powerful clans in Konoha, but he insisted that his actions were for the benefit of Konoha. For a while, the Sannin had been able to keep her nose out of it, unlike Shizune, who asked and got the information she wanted right away from the genin, but vowed to keep it quiet so Naruto would have to ask. But after meeting Itachi Uchiha face to face, she decided she truly needed to know what was going on with her companion for her own well-being. The ensuing speech about friendship, teamwork, and love for Konoha most likely had the potential to defeat Kakashi, Iruka, and the late Hokage, but it left the curvy medic nin unscathed. Compassion was not what those boobs were filled with, however. It might have just been her method of handling such situations, as Naruto woke up the following morning covered in ice water and avoiding senbon thrown by a laughing Shizune, who vowed that it was all her mentor's idea. The mention of returning one day caused Tsunade's face to stop contorting into a frown, but Naruto chose not to mention it still. For a year, Naruto had given himself permission to get up every day, run, swim, or climb a course that Tsunade had designed for him. He then consumed a substantial meal that contained enough protein to make up for the soreness he had to work out of his muscles every morning. Finally, he spent the rest of the day sparring with his clones or avoiding Tsunade's punches, once nearly breaking his left kneecap to splinters, much to the woman's annoyance, and concluded the day by increasing his chakra capacity. However, having Itachi on his side already guaranteed Kisame, for whom Itachi was the closest thing to a friend the Shark Man had probably ever had. In quiet moments, when he wasn't mopping or responding to Tsunade and Shizune's 20 questions, he considered how to reach the Akatsuki members. Kakuzu only cared about money, so he probably wouldn't be able to persuade him, unless Tsunade hadn't yet drunk and gambled away her grandfather's fortune, and it was decided to give the majority of it away to a missing nin in an attempt to stop him from destroying the village. Unlikely. Deidara didn't want to be part of a village, but he would be open to leaving Akatsuki sometime soon. Hidan wouldn't approve of Madara's plan once he heard it, not nearly chaotic enough. And that got almost everyone, with the exception of Zetsu, no comment, Tobi, who couldn't stand the little creep and vowed to end his life as soon as he was able, and Orochimaru, who wasn't even a member of the Akatsuki anymore. Enjoyable, enjoyable, enjoyable. The toads informed him about Konoha life, including Sakura's hospital volunteer work, Sasuke's fascination with a lookalike named Sai who was far more skilled with a brush than he was, Hinata's outreach to the branch house, and her growing control over her family life. More significantly, they described to him the general nature of the Anbu sent to capture them as well as the politics of the village. They had been able to stay hidden for the time being thanks to the tips. Naruto didn't want to be accused of acting against Konoha, even if it was in self-defense. However, 10 months without seeing the three ninja had succeeded in calming the anxious Konoha leaders into thinking they would stay hidden for the time being, and as a result, Konoha's honcho banchos began to focus on themselves. Now that Danzo had gotten his foot in the door, Jiraiya was not invited to many meetings, but everyone had access to the new laws. Naruto was primarily interested in the one that permitted warrantless searches of every home for harmful devices or information by which our glorious nation could be harmed. Their presence has not been questioned, as these searches have so far only produced honest-to-God infiltrators. Since real threats were unlikely to be that foolish, these criminals were either planted or spotted by root right away and permitted to remain until they could be used to demonstrate the need for the law. Danzo was becoming more powerful. 12 months later, Tsunade and Shizune were dispatched to interrupt Team 10, who were on a downtime mission to escort a wealthy woman to her equally wealthy sisters, information provided by Gamakichi, and make their case with a capable Junin because no one in their three-person group was happy about that. Although Asuma was unlikely to fight the two women without provocation, he would not be as readily persuaded by their story as Kakashi, who held people who prioritized their teammates above others in high regard. Furthermore, Shikamaru was there to persuade him not to if, for some strange reason, he did. Naruto realized almost immediately after Tsunade left that he would still need a ridiculous amount of money to get Kakuzu to keep a conversation quiet if he hoped to have any chance of persuading him to change sides. Teams of clones, including two brothers, a young couple, a mother and her teenage son, etc., were released to find employment in each village he visited, provided he had the energy. The fox understood why it was being done. Even though he felt the loss and became a little irritated by the continual leeching of his chakra, he helped the blonde charge each humanoid with chakra that lasted anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. After resting and doing some light exercise for a week, it was time to go find Snakeface. Orochimaru attacked Naruto as soon as he approached him, suggesting that he didn't like that Naruto had killed his assistant. Naruto yelled, "Stop that! I'm here to work out a deal with you." "Kukuku," the Sannin said, laughing around a swollen tongue. "A devoted Konoha nin wishes to negotiate with me?" Naruto continued to stand his ground, prepared for whatever the immortal would throw at him. "I don't have a forehead protector to prove it, but I'm a missing nin now," he said. "And I know you're not still loyal to Akatsuki, so I'm gonna come out and say it. Help me destroy their leader." "Are you sure you want that? Don't you want to make sure you know who he is first?" Orochimaru asked, his smile growing. "Pain? What are you talking about? Did you never wonder where you came from, Naruto Uzumaki?" Not wanting to mince words, Naruto searched his mind. Is this about pain actually being Nagato? Orochimaru's expression went blank. "I know he and I are related, distantly, but he's not Akatsuki's real leader." "Oh, the guy you want? Well, actually, I want, because I'm going to kill him. Is Madara Uchiha name ring a bell?" Thus, he found himself spending the night in one of his most enduring adversaries' lairs. "Boss. Hey, boss." "Gamakichi," Naruto said, raising his eyebrows in surprise despite being in a forest. He instinctively glanced around to see if anyone else was staring at the enormous toad. "It's good to see you, but why are you here?" Now about the size of a Great Dane, the toad blinked up at him, saying, "Hinata found the seal. She summoned me. It wasn't much of an effort." Gamakichi blinked at the urgency in his voice as he asked, "Did she say anything?" However, a year had almost passed. The Jinchuriki stifled a puff of annoyance and said, "Not much, just asked who I was. Gave me some sweets mostly. I talked. Her father was there." "Well, that made a difference, did he?" Gamakichi rearranged his limbs, webbed toes gracefully circling one another, and blinked once more, stayed real quiet and listened, just like Hinata. "I told them that you were training with Tsunade to take down a threat to Konoha, and that Tsunade was going to return to Konoha soon." After giving this some thought, Naruto asked, "Have you said anything like this to Jiraiya?" "Not yet. Can you? As soon as possible, so that he's established everything with Tsunade before the shit hits the fan in Konoha, and so that he can speak up for her when she and Shizune arrive." Gamakichi gave a nod and waited for his summoner to continue. Naruto paced. Hinata could communicate with Gamakichi if she discovered the seal, which would allow her to call her whenever she activated it. He had hoped that a year had taught her to be more independent, but if not, then so be it. There couldn't be anything more miserable than trying to avoid her in the same village as he was doing right now. Pushing a bottle of chocolate sauce in Hinata's direction, Sakura questioned, "You don't fight with your dad very often, do you?" Silently sucking the dessert from his spoon while observing the Hyuga, Sasuke remained silent. The Eris boy troubles had forced them to forego the planned afternoon spent watching a documentary about natural poisons on Sakura's couch. Itching in a strange way, Hinata huffed her bangs out of her eyes and said, "I didn't know what to do. I understand where he's coming from, but it's a chance to actually talk to Naruto." Silently activating her bloodline, she tucked her face into her hands as if rubbing it with fatigue there. A spy in the tree in Sakura's yard's far corner, outside the house. "To be sure," Sasuke inquired, "so you gave the seal to your father, anyway?" He grabbed the bag of chocolate chips from the table and poured them into his bowl before she could get to them. "He turned it into the council right after we found it, so that there wouldn't have been any time for us to even look at it," said Hinata as she waited for her chocolate turn. She absently tapped the table. The location is being observed. While waiting for Sakura to finish the whipped cream, Sasuke stopped helping himself and then gave himself another fourth of a cup before giving the bag to Hinata and wrapping his knuckles on the wood's underside. "Fox home?" Hinata shook her head in a barely noticeable way. "Here. Whipped cream?" Sakura inquired as she turned around with a tub and silently closed the refrigerator. "Yes," Hinata emphasized while maintaining eye contact with the Avenger. "Anyway, it's interesting about those new laws Councilman Danzo's backing, isn't it?" "I can't remember," Sasuke shrugged, his posture relaxed, and he was idly munching on 2 maraschino cherries, but his black eyes were fixed on Hinata's white ones. "The ones about confiscation of jutsu? It's a shame. I found a great medical text about cell deterioration and chakra affinity, but I had to submit it for a scan through the new academy division before I could read them," Sakura replied. "I heard that they're going to section off people by rank and give them passes to material that way." Out of his nose, Sasuke exhaled, "That's annoying." There was an awkward silence during which Sakura and Hinata wanted to agree but were afraid that their observer, whoever he was, might punish them for going against their glorious state. The game was probably already up if they could hear them, but Hinata surmised that from a distance, with their spy watching them through a window, they were limited to lip reading and trying to figure out what the seemingly random knocks against the wood meant. Sakura inquired, "How do you feel about a movie?" Sasuke inquired, "Does a documentary count as a movie?" After saying, I think anything that can be watched on a screen counts," Hinata hurried to cover the windows that faced the outside from the living room and kitchen. The three of them eyed each other unsurely, unsure of what to say that wasn't immediately clear. As soon as their watcher's view was obscured, they were suspected of speaking with Naruto, and they would have been in serious trouble if Hinata's remark that she wanted to speak with him had been discovered. She said, "All right, I'm not pretending I actually am interested in seeing this documentary." With a sigh, the girls started looking for pillows and quilts for a viewing that afternoon. With a put-out gesture, Hinata asked, "But why did you have to hand it over?" Before defensively crossing her arms over her chest to block out her father's cold stare. "They weren't used very often because anyone with a Byakugan could see inside them. We have plenty of seals that only Hyuga can activate. We even have hiding places in the house." A few chambers beneath some of the branch housing were small but spacious enough to house the Hyuga children in case of calamity, like another tailed beast attack. And there were 1 or 2 designated for keeping scrolls and valuables. Her father, who appeared more irate than she had ever seen him, asked, "Do you have any idea what is going on in the politics of this village?" He paced. "Councilman Danzo is considering taking the Hokage position and the council is making decisions in the Hokage's stead for now," she stated. "And that new decree about searches without warrant of any citizen being acceptable." Slowly, her father exhaled through his nose. "You are woefully ignorant." "What's going on, Otou-sama?" Hinata asked, shifting uneasily. As he looked directly into her eyes, Hiashi's expression stayed stern. "Not just searches without warrant, confiscation of any material not explicitly permitted by the council." "Well, yes, I knew that," Hinata replied. "It's inconvenient, but how bad could Ida? All clans have jutsu specifically tailored to them, and each one reserves the right to keep them a secret if the Hyuga wished. We could cease teaching our style and techniques, and the gentle fist would die with us," said the head of the Hyuga. "The same is true of the Nara shadow manipulations and Yamanaka mind jutsu. Councilman Danzo wants to have authority over the movements of these jutsu. It is only a question of time until the compound is searched for records of our technique and it is taught to ninja outside of our clan now that this decree is being implemented." Thinking of the spars where Naruto had blocked her vision, Hinata muttered, without the Byakugana, it's difficult to find the chakra pathways, but with practice, it's not impossible. Hiyashi replied, an opponent would be slowed down much better than with standard taijutsu using gentle fist. Hinata stammered, Buddha, gentle fist employs a particular kind of chakra. Our chakra, the gentle fist, is a good fit for Hyuga. Her chakra was designed for sneaking in and dealing damage, Ino's for flying in and manipulating, and Sasuke's for burning, or electrocuting, as his particular situation may be. Even she, a black sheep in terms of her family's propensity for blocking chakra pathways, would be infinitely better at it than, say, Ino or Sasuke. Since Hiyashi remained silent, she knew she was correct. No one could ever execute the Hyuga's technique more flawlessly than the Hyuga. More significantly, though, it's ours. Yes, it was a bloody history, as most ninja histories are, but it was hers. Her ancestors, her white-eyed grandparents, and her great-grandparents had used painful pressure on organs and blockages of vital energy to strike down enemies to Konoha. Councilman Danzo was not a good man, and here was that anger again, that flickering rage she'd felt when Naruto left, but this time it wasn't directed at her love, and she didn't care about the reasons behind the council's actions. This was a foolish attempt to take power away from her clan, an attempt that wasn't even appropriate for others. We own it. However, the leaders of Konoha have made a different decision. Hinata, we need to exercise caution, her father said, looking at her more affectionately but still gravely. Councilman Danzo shouldn't have any reason to suspect the Hyuga of being an enemy. The seal had to be presented to the council for this reason. Fearfully, Hinata looked into her father's pupilless eyes and said, if he thought that I knew where Naruto was, I would no longer be in charge of the Hyuga, not as Atreus' father. She didn't even want to consider how twisted things could get if Danzo started getting involved in the Hyuga's affairs. That's horrible. The clan was already edging closer to a precipice in terms of main branch house relations, but the displacement of her father would send everything into disarray. She had visions of the caged bird seal being given to younger and younger academy students to ensure that there would be no more sharing of Konoha secrets. A one-handed seal, and that missing nin was dead before they ever left Fire Country's border. Imagine Konoha at war. She could, but she didn't want to wearing the caged bird seal on her forehead. She would march into battle against whoever the council directed her to, and she would strive to gain more territory for her glorious state by dying a soldier's death. Her attempt was to say, these are peaceful times. The calm before the storm, pointed out her father. She hoped that Naruto had only keyed the seal to her and that the hospital had no more of the blood she had donated at the last village blood drive. Surely, it would have been kept anonymous so that no one needed to know who the previous owner of whatever samples the hospital collected was. Storm. Did Naruto know any of this would happen? So much had been left up to chance. She forced herself to slow down and tried not to think about how unknown hands were probably going through her and Naruto's possessions at their apartment right now. Are you familiar with this person? She swallowed. She was certain that the coffee she had consumed this morning was making her stomach turn. It's a frog. The orange skin had turned a brown, grainy red around deep cuts in nerve-rich parts of his limbs, and metal stakes had shabbily pinned the joints to the table, as if the former summon was no more than a biology specimen. He was missing the dark blue vest he always wore, and she had wondered why he had worn it, since it couldn't have kept the frog warm and it had no pockets to hold anything. Perhaps he had been justified in wanting to wear a vest, though, as she hadn't seen Naruto in more than a year and wasn't looking to date, but she had been playing around with makeup lately, partly for undercover mission purposes, and partly out of interest. Oh, gods. One of his eyes was open. Oh, hold on, it's a toad with warts. It's enormous. Summons. Why would you murder a summoned toad? They seemed devoted to Konoha, in my opinion. The toad was secreting a clear, filmy fluid, and the world was especially cruel in making it look like a tear. The toad's face was calm and showed no signs of pain, but that one tear seemed to be there for her. Why did she have to turn in the seal? She could have lied the moment her father found it, playing it off as Naruto not looking for scratch paper when he came up with the design and hastily writing the idea down on the photograph. She wouldn't have needed to turn in the damn thing. Nobody would have had to die for something this goddamn stupid. None of Naruto's summonses ever came to pass. In fact, I didn't realize he had a contract. Gamakichi enjoyed cheesy games and jokes, and he had enjoyed fried crackers. Have you heard anything from Naruto regarding his whereabouts? No, but if we do, we'll keep you posted, Hyuga-san. Thank you. She hadn't sobbed like this since Naruto had left, but now her father was the one testifying instead of Naruto's teammates. Why? She croaked. He was a Konoha agent. If a Konoha nin had instructed him to find Naruto, he wouldn't have even defied orders. Not openly, but since he was killed we can conclude that when he was questioned about Uzumaki's whereabouts, he refused to give them up. If you hadn't submitted the seal, nobody would have even been aware of it. I could have very well concealed it. She rounded on him. He was spared death. In what location would you have concealed it? Where in the village is it possible to conceal something that is invisible to even the Byakugan? Calmly, Hiyashi asked. Unwilling to continue crying in the face of his composure, she swallowed and blinked back another flood of tears. Hinata, the clan is in danger, because Naruto had decided he needed to leave to carry out his secret, too risky to include anyone else's mission. The clan was in danger from all of the above, the village was in danger from outside forces, so they had to obey the ninja. The ninja were in danger of the council taking away their rights, and the council was in danger of being called out on their blatant tyranny. Shutting her eyes, she recalled the sensation of his solid body behind her, the soft touch of his chin on her shoulder, the salt of ramen broth on his lips, the sensation of being pressed into the roof beneath him, and the way he had kissed her and vowed to stay. Now is not the time for tears, her father's voice cut in. No, absolutely not. She glanced at her father once more, refreshed by the thought of her hero, who, despite his awfulness, was the only person she knew who truly understood what he was doing. The Hyuga clan must continue to be resilient during these times of transition unified over the past year. Hinata, you have been fostering a strong bond between the main and branch. Keep doing that. What does this mean? She said, licking her lips. Yes, Hiyashi said, looking tired. He wasn't prepared to give her this, but he had no choice. I'll make the announcement tomorrow, and Hanabi will get the caged bird seal. The next Hyuga head will be you. When he was reverse summoned back to Mount Mayuboku, Naruto assumed something was wrong because the Toads hadn't done this even when he had left the village this time, so the act must have meant something serious or they wouldn't have bothered. He was hoping it was just Jiraiya nagging them to do it so he could talk to Naruto, or Gamabunta asking for a drink, or something pointless that would take up about 2 hours and allow him to resume his journey towards aim and consider whether Snakeface should go with him. However, he briefly lost his breath upon seeing Gamabunta's face. Gamabunta's deep voice and his way of flinging his weight around, both literally and figuratively, had always made him feel small next to him. Uzumaki Naruto, my son was summoned by you, Gamakichi? With quick blinks, Naruto said, where is he? His heart sank to a location close to his large intestine. We were hoping you could tell us. Naruto's heart pounded in his ears. Heya, he swallowed, his mouth parched. The last time I spoke, I asked him to speak to Jiraiya about my relationship with Tsunade and her impending return home. He felt the beginnings of tears build up behind his eyes. Why? In addition to keeping an eye on our young, the jutsu that enables us to ward off life-threatening threats and prevents them from dying when they are inadvertently called upon by new additions to the scroll. Gamakichi vanished from the scroll yesterday. What that meant didn't need to be explained. His face started to well up with hot, fatty tears. How on earth is that possible? How the hell did a jutsu that wasn't even touched in the previous timeline, that hadn't even crossed his mind before, fail? Naruto didn't care that the Toad Boss was silently observing him or that his face was likely streaked with dust from his dusty shirt. Gamabunta remained silent, observing him. This would be their first encounter, and it wasn't going at all as Naruto had hoped. The first encounter had been better, with fewer tears, snot, and sorrow weighing on everything. It wasn't you. The enormous toad finally sighed. My son wasn't killed by you. I would never ask him to do anything that I thought would hurt him. Naruto gritted his teeth and snarled back at the enormous summoner after swallowing, salt bitter in his throat. I don't use my friends. Jiraiya is being reverse summoned next, Gamabunta said, closing his eyes and letting out a weary sigh. In order for us to send you back before he arrives, you must concentrate on where you were previously. He scowled and felt Kurama's chakra unravel from his stomach and spread through him like the warmth of a stiff drink, extending his canines and bleeding into his irises. No, Naruto murmured. I need to talk to him. I need to find out who did this. Jiraiya didn't even wait to find out why he had been summoned. He saw Naruto and struck the blonde in the ear, watching him stumble before the Jinchuriki tried to retaliate with his limited balance. What the fuck was that for? Stupid pervert. Naruto growled, glad to release some of his pent-up rage but not particularly angry with Jiraiya. Brat, you know what it was for. The elder ninja snarled. After this, don't think you're going to get away from me. Gamabunta roared. Jiraiya, stop wasting your time. The seal master froze and turned to face the toad, smoothing out his features as he listened to the boss's tone. In spite of the toad's affinity for water, Naruto had never given it much thought before, but now he recognized that the normally boisterous summon was much more subdued. Gamabunta simply sounded exhausted. and he looked every inch the old soul that those who had witnessed battle were. It wasn't fair when children died before their parents. There was nothing more unsettling than witnessing Jiraiya's face turn pale as Gamabunta explained how they had learned about Gamakichi. "Fuck it. I made that damn seal," exclaimed the Toad Sage, lowering himself to the ground and punching it until his knuckles popped. "They requested it from me. I assumed it was for handling Grass's crow summons." Despite his fingers being limp, he punched the ground once more without hesitation. "So, that's how they trapped him," Naruto said, resisting the urge to destroy. Instead, he allowed his newly formed claws to dig into his palms and keep him grounded. However, how did they initially obtain him? Then he recalled Gamakichi's response to the seal he had left for Hinata. "Oh, please, no," he muttered to himself. "I left Hinata a seal to contact me with," he said, staring back at them with wide eyes as two heads turned to face him. "Just before I sent Gamakichi to you, he went back and forth between us once," he told Jiraiya. "Was it because of Hinata that she had turned it in?" he muttered. "She wouldn't as he tried to figure out why she would turn him in if she really did. Hinata love him back? Had his departure caused her to completely misjudge her feelings for him? No, she wouldn't," Jiraiya told him. Naruto hadn't thought of Jiraiya in a comforting way since he'd seen him here again, but the words had a certain reassuring quality. While it's possible that the sage was merely attempting to prevent him from losing Ida, knowing that Hinata was a contributing factor in his defection and not wanting to deal with an emotionally compromised container of the Nine Tails, especially so close to so many young Toadsa, it was nonetheless mitigating. Hiyashi would, Jiraiya conceded, and then, if he turned the seal in, Danzo would find a way to use it. It was never fucking enough with him, was it? Something snapped inside Naruto. "Danzo," he breathed, his malevolent chakra leaking out and poisoning the air. "So this Danzo," Gamabunta said, his anger now leaking into his sober voice, "is the one who killed my boy." They were literally 2 seconds away from Gamabunta going on a rampage in Konoha until he located the root leader and killed him in retaliation, which was unlikely because Danzo had an entire army of brainwashed soldiers ready to keep him alive and another army that would defend their councilman, invasive policies or not, against a rampaging beast without even stopping to consider why a toad, Konoha's traditional ally, was trying to kill him. That's when Naruto realized how dangerous the situation was. Before they returned to the mammoth summon and tried to soothe him, he looked nervously into Jiraiya's eyes and the two of them exchanged a moment of fear. Although Naruto wasn't particularly arrogant, he was ecstatic when the toad's medic was able to fix his broken front tooth. He tongued the white square tenderly and added, "It feels bigger," to the brisk healer. "It is," after saying calmly, "You'll wear it down to normal size by eating and doing what you usually do." She handed him a green popsicle and said, "Here. Suck it, it will make the pain go away." Naruto shook his head and smiled unevenly as he noticed what appeared to be an iced grasshopper leg protruding from the side. "Polite pass," he said. "To be honest, I can hardly feel it at all." This is a lie, but he would much rather have a throb in his mouth than crunchy bug bits. "Men," she sighed, but after that, the toad released him, and he encountered Jiraiya outside, who was tending to 2 black eyes and a broken finger, always trying to be tougher than you were smart. Before Jiraiya slapped the back of his head, the seal master and he exchanged a small smile, both of them grateful that the day had not ended in a fight between Konoha and the toads. "You're a little shit. Let me tell you what I've been up to," Naruto said, taking a deep breath before flinching as the cold air struck his teeth, which were all sensitive for some reason. After waiting around Mount Mayuboku for a week while Jiraiya tried to win Tsunade over to Konoha, Naruto had to endure 6 months of intense training under the guidance of the Toad Sage before a message from the soon-to-be 5th Hokage sent the Sannin fleeing back to the Hidden Leaf Village and he was left alone once more. Not for long, as Orochimaru was now aiming nasty objects at his head and skiing him when he failed to dodge quickly enough. "And to think, you beat Kabuto," the man with the black hair had told him, a little disappointed. "We can record that one as a suicide to avoid you if that's how your training sessions with him went." From inside a horde of clones who were trying their hardest to offer themselves as food for his way too slithery foes, Naruto retorted. Finally, Naruto was left to spend his days taunting Itachi and other Akatsuki members until they agreed to work with him and attempting to collect money to win Kakuzu over to his cause after the Snake Sannin decided he was dodging quickly enough and expressed his belief that his laboratories missed him. Her hair was dyed to reflect brown in the light, her eyes were covered with dark lenses, and her chest was bound to prevent it from drawing as much of the wrong kind of attention as it might in such a place, but it was unquestionably her. Naruto's breath caught in his throat and appeared to have trouble finding the rest of his windpipe. Overly perceptive eyes noticed that Hinata Hyuga had painted her nails a dark blue, which was bold, but so was Sakura, so he could assume that was the source. Hinata Hyuga had grown taller, fuller, standing up straighter, and had hair that reached her tailbone in a thick braid after 2.5 years. Her eyes followed the way her hips swelled out from her slim obi, far more alluring than they had any right to be in such conservative clothing. He assumed the manner of dress was plain for that reason, and he hoped no one had been perceptive enough to notice how goddamn beautiful she looked and asked for a good time with her or something. She ignored him, calmly setting abandoned teacups onto her tray and returning to the kitchen with them in a graceful manner. "Ah, Fuku-sama, are you here to meet a friend or rent a room?" The manager strolled over. His cheerful demeanor, flushed cheeks, and noticeable size gave the impression that his business was doing well. Naruto had been supporting it with large tips and regular business during his meetings. From what he could see, the girls here only offered their services when they felt like it, not because the man had forced them to, and each of them had appeared to be extremely grateful for his role in their lives. The man swiftly followed Naruto's gaze, suggesting that he was not quick enough to turn away from the undercover Kunoichi's rear end. "Oh, our newest Hime-chan. Indeed. Hinata wasn't pretending to be a prostitute because she isn't available to entertain, she can only wait." His voice came out as a whine, despite his best efforts to control his desperation. Can I just talk to her, in private?" he offered. "I used to know her." This was a bad idea, because after meeting Sasuke's brother here, he had to find his newest sensei, if he could even call him that, and get to the approximate place Jiraiya had asked him to be tomorrow afternoon. The manager gave him a stern look and said, "Just talk?" Although he only nodded on the outside, Naruto secretly felt a surge of respect for the man, who was obviously protective of his girls. "Yes, just speak." After pausing, the man nodded and said, "Very well." In an attempt to win him back, Naruto said, "And I'll have a table. I'm meeting someone in about 15 minutes. He led the disguised ninja to a clean, empty first-floor room with a small stage for entertaining guests with music or a dance performance. "Of course," the man said, smiling once more but appearing less amiable. He then went to Hime to retrieve him. Looking more than a little nervous, she walked in and said, "Hello." He said, hoarsely, "Hello," wondering if she would recognize the expression on his henge. She pretended to rub her eyes and said, "Pardon me, I'm having a lot of trouble with them today." Meanwhile, he uttered softly, "Hinata, you," without bothering to conceal the protruding veins from her Byakugan. She gaped at him before kicking him in the stomach in 2 quick motions and pulling open her kimono's skirt. He wondered how that worked, but assumed she had changed it in case of conflict. He vaguely heard the manager stick his head in and ask Hinata if he was okay, to which she replied with crossed arms and a, "Yes." He just had it coming to him, apparently. Being a ninja had nothing to do with putting up with heeled shoes hitting his stomach at high speeds. Regardless of the timeline he was in, he was bound to suffer some kind of physical punishment for his foolishness, and always at the hands of a woman. For a few minutes, he lay there trying not to throw up. Hinata went back to the waiting tables, so there was no need to be concerned about him rushing away, and he kept his face against the cool wood floor until the manager popped in with a somewhat sarcastic, "Sir, your friend has arrived." Naruto wheezed, "Sure, be right there," and the man vanished holding his hands together in a seal. He focused more intently than he had since learning the jutsu, and created a healthy clone that did not cry softly. The original gave him the finger, and the clone stuck out his tongue before joining Itachi for tea. "That's just sad," the copy said, glancing at him as he lay crumpled on the ground. Hinata was outside dragging a paper bag full of beer bottles and other glass to a specific dumpster when the missing nin had left and Naruto went looking for her again. He had made sure he didn't get caught by the owner, because if he did anything that would get him permanently kicked out of the restaurant turned brothel, not to mention arrested, it would be following one of the girls into the alley behind the building. After she threw the bag into the trash, she turned to him expectantly and pulled him in close. He fumbled, not at all ready for her mouth on his. MMPH. He stumbled away, gasping for air, feeling lightheaded from the prolonged kiss. What was that? What was that? He made wild motions as if the scene from the spare room were playing in the background. Her eyes crinkled with laughter, and he realized, after a delay, that he wasn't upset. First was for pretty much everyone. Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Iruka-sensei and I all agreed you'd be hit if we came into contact with you, she said. And this? His eyes narrowed as he licked his lips, which were faintly flavored from a lip balm he recalled she enjoyed. She grinned and said, "That was for me," to him. Finally tall enough to look down into her face when they stood side by side, and old enough that he could feel every line of her body against his through their clothing, he put his hands awkwardly on her waist and pulled her to him, forgetting about age, maturity, and all the other nonsense that came with time travel. Then, he inhaled, enjoying the flavor of her sigh as it entered his gaping mouth. This will be for me, okay? She had no concerns about appearance either, as her hands fisted tightly in the cloth of his kimono and pulled, nearly causing him to lose his balance, and they broke apart as he nosed past her loosening hair to her neck. Breathing in the scent of her shampoo and laundry soap, this kiss was deeper and longer than the previous one, and his mouth remained open against hers as their tongues touched tentatively, then faster as they picked up a rhythm. Naruto-kun, she exhaled sharply, her lips near his ear, her fingers running through his hair. Can you drop the henge? Let me see you. He was on the verge of doing so, but the sound of gravel crunching beneath a shoe made him freeze, and he withdrew from Hera not far enough to act as though nothing was happening, but his gaze was fixed on the figure of a woman approaching them. He kept his hands on her waist and his lips grazing the silk of her bangs. Hinata made a sound of embarrassment as she approached, huffing, Suma-san, how long have you been there? Naruto honestly didn't know if she was lying about that and simply based her conclusions on what she'd walked in on just now, or if the two of them had actually been so out of it that they couldn't sense a civilian approaching. Long enough, the woman replied, a knowing smirk curling her mahogany red lips up. This is a surprise. And our beloved Haim-chan and Fuku-sama. Even though neither of those individuals was real, Naruto's cheeks turned red. Hinata reflected him, saying, it's not that big of a deal, is it? Isn't it a huge deal? We all thought you were just a waitress, the woman sneered. I am just a waitress. She used to work for my family, Naruto claimed, falsifying the statement as easily as breathing. She left just before I did, to start my business, and I didn't think I'd see her again. He pulled her fingers away from her belt and held them, just because he could, while Hinata nodded, looking down and fumbling shyly with her belt. Naruto noticed a cracked tooth in the woman's smile as she said, look at you too, but it's best not to linger here too long, it's growing late. Fingering the hem of his kimono, Hinata concurred, it's dangerous in the city at night. It wasn't about the soon-to-be mother tonight, but Hinata's apartment was close to her target, a young, pregnant runaway who wasn't in a state to be hustled home, and she would have to wait out the birth before taking the mother and child back to their well-paying family, by force if necessary. Hinata braced herself against her kitchen counter and remarked, this is familiar, as Naruto, now without his henge and grinning at her in all his blonde, blue-eyed, bewhiskered glory, kneaded the muscles in her back. Yes, and all of the kissing that had taken place on that specific piece of furniture. Hinata didn't answer. You? I'm thinking about the rooftop. Mood. Naruto sighed, lowering his face and wrapping his arms around her until he was certain his breath tickled her neck. Killer. Without looking at him, she crossed her arms and asked, what made you go? I couldn't get it done in the village, he said, blowing a lock of hair off his forehead. You were aware of that. You told me you wouldn't leave, so why did you? I'm sorry. Oh, that hurt. Well, you should be, although she didn't say it, the feeling was still present in the room. I am, he said, removing his hands from her and backing away. Then, I simply couldn't say anything more. Before he could get too far away, she grabbed his shirt and said, don't. He turned to face her and said, if we don't resolve this now, we never will. All right, he sighed, where should we begin? She gave him a confused look and said, I'm mad at you for leaving. I apologize for leaving after I promised not to, and for not even telling you what it was all about, he said without missing a beat. I apologize for Gamakichi, she said, lowering her gaze to the counter once more. That one wasn't your fault, he scowled. It was a bunch of bullshit. I am working to ensure that Danzo is taken care of. That, Hinata said, scowling and pointing at him. All that preparation and secrecy part of the issue is that. I really don't know how to explain it to you, Naruto said, flinching. Hinata said, try. Her tone was firm, but not Hyuga's. She wasn't concealing her anger at him behind a stern expression or abrasive language. He glanced down at his hand's default. The Kyuubi told me some information when I was younger. Hinata's Byakugan was focused on his heart, which was likely giving him away with a twitching of nerves or something. You're lying. I can't tell you. Okay, Naruto said, raising his hands in the air. I could foresee what would happen because I had access to information outside of Konoha. People were going to cause us problems, and I didn't think the council would allow me to go fix it, so I left. And you were unable to foresee the issues within Konoha? Hinata spoke sharply. How could that have been predicted? Now a little irritated, Naruto remarked, do you think I realized how fucking crazy Danzo is? I didn't think he wanted a population of soldiers, but I did think he was a bad guy who approached what he believed to be right for the village in a completely wrong way. Hinata paused. Me too. What role do I play in all this planning? She continued to use her Byakugan, looking at whatever it was about him that revealed when he was lying. He wished his heart, nervous system, chakra, or whatever it was not to do something foolish. I love you, he said, and I have loved you since we were 12. Hinata. I'll say it 100 times and it will still be the truth. He reached out to her and she stepped forward, apparently satisfied and blinking tears out of her fake brown eyes. Okay, she said softly, her voice exactly like the one she used in his living room following the awkward makeout session. I love you, too. They had just begun to sleep on her lumpy couch when Hinata was startled out of him and nearly ran to the door by an urgent knock. What's going on? In an attempt to return to the land of the living, Naruto asked in a raspy voice. Ignoring him, Hinata threw open the door and confronted a nervous young woman, asking, Is it time? When she nodded, Naruto finally saw how swollen her belly was, a pregnant woman about to give birth, and he hurried up, saying, I'll get one of those runner carriages, while pulling on his jacket. No, Hinata replied, even if they weren't slow, those are too bouncy for a woman with a child. Call the hospital using the phone in the lobby. Emergency numbers are located next to it, then go to room 206 and fetch the landlord's wife. After saying, got it, Naruto hurried out of there. Even though he didn't really want to consider why, the image of Hinata holding a baby made him feel queasy as the mother slept. The disguised Hyuga rocked the red-faced lump to her chest, and Naruto clumsily sat close by, massaging her head and neck because he didn't really trust himself not to drop the child if she handed it to him. Are you returning now? He muttered. A few days for her to recover, then they're coming with me onto a steamboat that will take us upstream to the town her family's in, she said, rearranging the blanket around the newborn who was breathing softly. I think it's time for me to come back to Konoha. Naruto stared at her, a little proud of her maturity, and he said, I think it's time for me to come back to Konoha. He had an obligation to drag Orochimaru by the ear to participate in a fight that was going to happen somewhere a short distance from Konoha, so he might as well just stay here. After his plans to avoid Konoha only went so far. Silently, Hinata looked into his eyes, and he leaned in to kiss her, and she did the same after a brief hesitation. Is everything there going well? Not that he'd be any help with baby problems, anyway, he asked Hinata after she returned from her neighbor's house. She nodded, and the faint frown above her nose turned into a deep crinkle when she saw him carrying his papers. You're going to leave now? Gotta catch the midnight trolley if I want to get on the first train to Fire Country. Well, he had to find the snake Sanin first, and then, since no ordinary train ride would get the two of them into Fire Country undetected, he had to hustle both of their asses over the border, and his eye-aligned highness did not like being rushed. And to the approximate location Jiraiya had Toad message him, a little prep time wouldn't hurt even if they weren't late to the party. Stay with me tonight, she said, biting her lip. He was about to shoot her down, but he had to get moving because it was difficult to find Orochimaru, even if you were all buddy-buddy. She sighed and said his name, Naruto, which caused him to blink at her lips in blankness. After that trolley, when is the next one? When she performed the apprehensive, prodding motion with her hands, he asked foolishly, preoccupied by the light bouncing off her dark fingernails. 6 a.m., I'm pretty sure, she said, continuing to avoid eye contact, her skin flushing pink under her lashisa. Had she applied makeup? Her eyelashes appeared darker, and the color difference between her eyelid and the surrounding skin was more pronounced than it had been. Suddenly, he became acutely conscious of the 6 condoms in his bag. He croaked, I can stay. If it's okay with you, I'll crash here. I don't, she replied. Kay, he said, stumbling over to her couch, do you have any extra blankets? You can share my bed. Is this the part where I start taking my clothes off? He asked, swallowing, before turning to face her, knowing that his face was likely red enough to match hers, and that this was how they would spend the entire night unless she started talking soon. He snickered into his fist at that thought, and Hinata pouted, what? Come here. He spread his arms wide and let her walk to him, pulling her closer when she was within reach and meeting her mouth with his. Hands in a safe zone on her hips but bold enough to bite down on her lips and move to her neck with his kisses. He glanced at her again, saw that she was now crossing her arms defensively in front of her and appeared more uncertain than she had since he'd seen her in the inn. Do not get your hopes up, he mentally chanted, do not put pressure on her, do not get your hopes up, as Hinata retreated after 30 seconds and grabbed his hand, dragging him to her room. However, he heard himself gasp aloud as her hands moved under his shirt and started to wander around his stomach, one finger gliding down the hairline beneath his navel. He then drew her closer to him, his hands not so elegantly on her ass, and the friction in his pants caused him to repeat his outburst with a loud moan into her skin. Hinata, who hated clothes at the time, made a noise he hoped wasn't actually a laugh and kissed a line from his chin to his ear while trying to remove his shirt. The stupid thing was off in a millisecond and might have torn a little during the movement, but he didn't care. Hinata remarked, "I think you tore it," as she looked at the garment hanging off her dresser. "Don't be that guy," Naruto quickly responded, "I'll buy a new one." His voice coming out in an audible whine, he reached for her again, but had to stop because her hands were pushing him back. Her finger ghosted over the scar tissue on his left bicep, but it wasn't what he had assumed. How'd this happen? Fucking Orochimaru. Training accident. That clarified who was more interested in this. I thought Jinchuriki couldn't scar. She was looking at the rest of his torso now, and he had to fight the urge to flex. Something about raised scars coming from skin that formed too fast and made extra. So fast healing not really helping with that. That was in addition to Kurama's many jabs about him being conceited when he had complained. The motto of all his teachers was always, if you have time to worry about how your abs look, you have time to practice ninjutsu, taijutsu, sealing. Hinata acknowledged, then ran her hand straight down his front, feeling what little abdominal muscle he gained from combat training. Therefore, he didn't have much in the way of superhuman abdominals, as genetics hadn't given him a preformed six-pack. With a, "Sorry," Hinata unzipped her sweatshirt. With his eyes on her chest, he stated bluntly, "I am not complaining," and grinned when she giggled. He wasn't exactly a boob expert, but the two sports bras she wore to keep her bust down to an unnoticeable size for work actually looked like they hurt. They kissed again. And how did you tell a girl you were making out with to take off her bra while sounding genuinely concerned for her health? They were down to almost Sakura's size, which couldn't be comfortable. Half of the solution was already visible when they fell onto the bed, Hinata leaning against the pillows and him straddling her legs to keep his heavier weight off of her without breaking the kiss. Hinata took both arms out of the top binder and quickly put it under her tank top, around her neck, and over her head. She apologized once more, saying, "It was a little awkward." He smiled casually and tried not to appear overly relieved. "Again, not complaining," he said. She continued to run her hands over his front, feeling his pectorals and sides, moving her mouth farther down his body and leaving a bite mark on his shoulder, brushing her thumb over his nipple, and giving him a smile that was despite his intense blushing. Her teeth caught his bottom lip and gently pulled until he followed her back onto the pillows, carefully balancing between his knees and forearms. And she was at ease. She was taking off her clothes and touching the parts that were typically covered, and she didn't seem to mind at all when his erection prodded her thigh. With his hands resting on her thighs, Naruto took all of this as an invitation to go further, trailing his tongue down her front as far as it would go, which wasn't far because the sports bra made it difficult to access her cleavage, and then continuing with his nose, inhaling the seductive, girly scent of her skin and clothes until his mouth hovered over the button on her pants. He looked up for permission to undo them, and when she nodded, he did so, pulling them down to about her knees and then going back up for a kiss so she could kick them off without kicking him in the face. He felt a pull in his stomach as the smell of her arousal hit him. He fought the impulse to put his nose between her legs and take a whiff. Her underwear was plain, black, and slightly ruffled with tiny pink bows, but nothing too fancy. It had become quite silent, cute undies. Hinata reddened without looking at her. He moved her panties experimentally with 2 fingers slipped under the fabric, pleased to discover a sticky wetness already there. Although it was uncomfortable, he maintained eye contact long enough to ensure that he had permission to take off this article of clothing as well. She closed her eyes at this point, likely too shy to look at his face as he saw her nude for the first time, but this is when he stopped hesitating. His first lick up her folds was firm, not tentative. He wanted her to feel this, and she certainly did, judging by the way her legs went from awkwardly underneath him to resting on his shoulders, and by the sudden tight grip of her hand in his hair. He moved his tongue around erratically for a few moments before swiping it over her clitoris, eliciting a muffled "ha." He repeated the action, pressing down with his tongue, kissing the spot firmly, and, very carefully, moving his teeth over it repeatedly until Hinata let out another muffled exclamation, her hips arching up to completely drown him in the taste of her, and a painful tug on his hair for his efforts. All right. There were some benefits to this time travel thing, he thought as he withdrew, still licking remnants of her from his lips, cleaning the substance that had smeared on his chin, and purposefully sucking the fluid off his fingers while smiling at her. Hinata pulled him down to her for a passionate kiss with unexpected vigor this time. She cupped the bulge in his pants, which he was now very grateful for, and then undid them herself. "Defense?" she inquired. "Shit in my bag, but that's what clones were for." While the copy got the box and returned to the room, Naruto had lost his boxers and pants and was trying to remove the shirt from a girl who was having a never seen a penis in this context before. moment after throwing all of his clothes into a random corner and satisfying Hinata's curiosity, he carefully rolled the rubber over his length and then steadied himself above her, enjoying the fact that he could finally look her in the eye during intercourse. And he lost most of his ability to think rationally there. Shit. This was not the day, but perhaps one day they would reach a place where he could say something other than obscenities while making love. Hinata. Hold on, he figured getting her off on the first time gave him some leeway in this area, but orgasm was more about him whimpering profanities into Hinata's ear while his hips did some strange gyrating thing and she probably tried to figure out what the hell was going on with him. It was 5 in the morning, and he was fighting the impulse to give everything away, put his nose in the woman's shoulder, and just go to sleep. Naruto, you're going to miss your trolley. He shifted slightly and opened his eyes wide as his dick rubbed between Hinata's thighs, waking him up with a wave of all things amazing. I can run there faster than the fucking trolley, he muttered. You'll be tired, not if I sleep now. Incredibly, he wasn't actually thinking about sleep at the moment. Upon closer examination, it was discovered that his left arm had compensated for falling asleep because he was beneath his partner by snatching Hinata's breast a few times during the night. He groaned as Hinata tightened her legs together in a playful manner and said, "You're not tired now," with a smile in her voice. Naruto fumbled for a condom, and Hinata once again watched him apply it with the ferocity of a craft student as his ninja girlfriend placed herself over his erection and had him on his back in 2 quick motions. He grinned and remarked, "Nay, you're lucky I'm not self-conscious." She puckered up. "You should just get me a mirror so I can stare at your reflection and you don't feel like I'm getting in your way." "Clones," Naruto whispered conspiratorially, ecstatic when her face changed color. "Hinata," he said, laughing, leaning in until his mouth was a centimeter from her ear. Although Naruto didn't intend to be that guy, I got laid. He had saved the dance move for this very moment, but there was not enough time to pause and perform it instead. With a shit-eating grin on his face, he hummed to himself as he jumped through the branches to his next checkpoint. Twice. If he included eating Hinata out, 3 times he was smiling so much that it was beginning to hurt his cheeks. Calm down. It was challenging to take deep breaths while running quickly enough to use chakra to strengthen his legs the moment that he seemed to need to accept that he had finally done the do with his girlfriend was gone, and he kind of wished he hadn't stayed with her for so long. It wasn't that it hadn't been used well, it had been used to leave another pattern of hickeys on her boobsha, but he was pressed for time now. In any case, you're late because you were copulating? Orochimaru sniffed. Nothing, choked Naruto. What the hell? You can tell. That's totally creepy. You didn't shower afterwards, did you? Fast. I so did. There wasn't much warm water in Hinata's shower, and you kind of forget about soap when you're drowning in what might as well have been ice. He mostly just splattered water where he thought he might be unclean. Then he crawled back under the covers and huddled against Hinata, who slapped his goosebumps-covered arm and yelled in response to the cold. The Sannin sniffed once more, with contempt this time, and flew toward Konoha. Naruto shouted, "And who says, copulating?" as he pursued him. After a while, Naruto was still speaking while the snake summoner withheld 1 or 3 bites. "Okay. So, horizontal tango is a little old-fashioned, too," conceded Naruto. "What about getting fresh?" Nor did Orochimaru respond. "You know what phrase I've always been fond of? Fuckerina." The man with the black hair moaned fantastic. He was getting tired of him. "I've always liked the song." With his teeth clenched tightly, the other man uttered, "You realize we are on our way to a battle, yes? That we need to conserve our energy?" Naruto laughed. "Maybe you do. I have endless stamina. Hey, can I ask you, I know you're gay, but in regards to..." Orochimaru growled, "After this is over, you're next." Naruto swore as a wiggling, scaly thing flew at him and wrapped itself around his neck and torso. It wasn't a squeeze, but it was much more intimate than he had ever wanted to have with something so cold and slithery. "Fighting's fine, but no snakes in weird places, K?" he said, "Get it off. Then be quiet." The snake tasted the air and then whispered, "Are you aware that you've been bugged?" Orochimaru nearly halted, but instead managed to give Naruto and the snake a startled glance while making cautious checks for any branches that might be in his path. "What?" "There's a Kakaichu on his right shoulder, master." "Hinata. Why would a Kakaichu be on his..." Naruto let out a sigh. He couldn't blame her. Anyway, even after seeing him confess using her family's jutsu, he was a little annoyed that she didn't trust him that much. How on earth had she kept it alive when she was away from Shino? "Shall I remove it?" the snake asked, opening its jaws much wider than would have been appropriate for a bug that small. This allowed the Jinchuriki to get a clear view of the long, needle-like teeth inside the snake's skull. "No, it's fine," Hinata would become anxious if it were removed. It was acceptable to spy on him a little while he was evading the law in any case. Once he used Kyuubi's chakra, the beetle would perish. Orochimaru remained silent. And despite his conflicted emotions, Naruto felt somewhat proud. This was not the Hinata who believed everything he told her without question. This individual was new ninja. She hadn't slept with him and was now going behind his back. The woman who had declared her love for him was still here. Simply put, for the two of them, love and trust were no longer synonymous. By the time they arrived, the party had clearly already begun. When Naruto saw them, a fat toad he didn't recognize exclaimed, "Ribbit," and gave Naruto a light tongue slap, leaving a sticky mess on his arm. "You're running late," it remarked angrily. Now that he was not running, Naruto frantically tried to push Orochimaru's summon off of himself. "We don't mean to be," he said. Ahead there was a crash. Orochimaru jumped in the direction of the commotion, avoiding shrapnel and sticking out his tongue to gain a better understanding of the battle. Naruto entered last, and he was extremely appreciative. It was worth missing a battle to witness the Sannin cooperating against an adversary. Gamabunta and Katsuyu were already present, and when Orochimaru joined them, a snake and not Manda, but lately, nobody seemed to care much for the biggest snake. Summoner also showed up. The giant summons looked at one another warily, not wanting to fight again, especially the snake, which was only around half as big as the toad or slug. However, they focused on their shared target under the guidance of their summoners. For his part, Danzo appeared largely composed. Naruto was agitated because he was perched on a tree branch and was unable to detect any signs of the crone's agitation. What had they been lacking? The man said drearily, "The Sannin come together to take me down. What an honor, and I take it Uzumaki was the one that managed to make you three work together." Naruto jumped from his perch and gave the elder a fierce look. It was this man who had given the order to wipe out the Uchiha clan. "You're one fucked up bastard, Danzo." Danzo smiled mischievously and said, "Naruto Uzumaki, so you have been corrupted by the Kyuubi." Maybe that was what was making him red behind him. Two tails lifted and scorched the vegetation. "You ordered Itachi to kill his parents. You took away the will of Konoha's soldiers." Naruto screamed. He had remembered Root and Sai. Danzo froze. "You were well informed." This time, the fox's energy surfaced and another tail formed, but this time it wasn't even his anger. Naruto yelled, "Why? What did Sasuke's parents die for?" He opened and fisted his clawed hands. Wanting to tear something to shreds not too far away was his least favorite definition of a Jinchuriki. He certainly qualifies as a weapon of mass destruction in this form. The elder ninja said nothing. Gamabunta declared, "Kid Orochimaru, this bastard is mine." From Gamabunta's head, Jiraiya waved, "Yo, Naruto, you're late." Naruto yelled back, "Got lost on the road of life," before quickly stepping aside as a pebble struck him with the force of a rocket. When he said, "If I hear that one more time," Tsunade frowned. Naruto started to respond, but instead uttered a word like, "Goo," after Danzo had flown at him and hit him twice in the stomach. Two strange blows, considering how his guts felt afterward. His face was too close to Danzo's. His breath had a toothpaste and tea scent to remove the bandages covering his face. The arm that wasn't shielding Naruto's fist from Hima and was being burned by Kyuubi's chakra came up. Naruto nearly lost it at that point. Wasn't it always the damn Sharingan? With two more tails extending behind him, he roared and slammed the other man away from him, making 5, another, 6. Subsequently, he heard Kurama chuckle, saying, "You are one eager brat." Then, a funny sensation arose in his stomach, and he found himself in Biju mode. Naruto stood and breathed for a moment. Energy was beaming from the fox to him, and it felt fantastic. He couldn't even feel what the fuck Danzo had done to him. "Naruto," rumbled the fox, "this is your first time. You only have." As the thief ducked a jutsu from Orochimaru and launched an attack at Tsunade, Naruto muttered to himself, 5 minutes. While he stared at Danzo, Jiraiya was sprinting towards Gamabunta from behind. He couldn't ignore what was happening to his godson, but he couldn't deny the toad his retribution when it was right in front of him. "I remember." After narrowly avoiding another blow, Danzo stood on the remains of a tree to remove the bandages from his arm, exposing numerous embedded Sharingans. When he was in this form, the dark chakra had little effect, but he didn't need it to make him want to tear that jerk to pieces. After saying, 5 minutes is enough, he called forth 2 clones, Rasen, Shuriken. His doubles cried as soon as the traitor was out of range of Orochimaru's summons. The 3 of them shouted and hurled the wind blades at him. The clones yelled, "Yeah!" when it struck, but it only struck Danzo's leg. With its likenesses rotating in his right arm, a lone red eye turned to face him, intent on observing his other adversaries. To the Jinchuriki's delight, the root leader was unable to move the leg, even though it didn't appear to have been severely damaged. No matter how many eyes he had, a one-legged man against a Jinchuriki and a Sannin was not really a contest. Danzo had known from the start that he wouldn't survive this, and Naruto realized this with a twinge of resentment. With the promise of a fight against a feisty, green Hokage, which Danzo would have believed he could win, Tsunade had enticed him and his two Anbu into the forest. However, Jiraiya's surprise techniques were too strong for his Anbu, and soon he found himself up against two legendary ninja. He might have hoped for escape with a little more assurance than Orochimaru and Naruto showed up. Gamabunta and Tsunade had both been hurt by the councilman's last-ditch jutsu. The toad was trying to move his stiff, bloody-webbed fingers, and the woman's face and neck were bleeding profusely. She was pale and having trouble breathing, perhaps not even from the wound but from the sight of blood. Naruto approached to examine Danzo's remains. Orochimaru would be extremely upset to learn that none of the Uchiha eyes had survived the explosion once he stopped arguing with Jiraiya. Jiraiya bid farewell to a solemn Gamabunta who appeared unhappy at the root leader's demise and swiftly sealed the remains in a scroll for later analysis. Soon after, Katsuyu departed, and Jiraiya covered Tsunade with his shirt to shield her from the blood splattered across her front. Since Orochimaru was going to allow himself to be seen in the area as a favor to the three of them, it would be impossible to sneak back into the village, but it would be easy to pretend that it was a fight against their own teammate. When Naruto saw Jiraiya's obscene smile, his thoughts were interrupted. What? You got lucky, didn't you? He twitched his eye. No? You're lying. I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. How do you manage to run into Hinata while being a missing nin? Tsunade shrugged. I sent her out of the village a while ago. Some breathing space from her family, she said on his behalf. Whistling, Jiraiya said, that's some incredible timing. I didn't have sex. Jiraiya turned to Orochimaru and exclaimed, Oi, snake face, he get laid? Orochimaru called. I think Naruto used the word, fuck arena. Naruto snarled at the men as he sidestepped Tsunade's blows, attempting to get a decent threat over her cries. How would you two like to get a really close look at the Rasen Shuriken? He asked. I wouldn't mind, said Jiraiya in a friendly manner. No respect for the girl who's put just about all her pay into your shoebox apartment. Great. Kage Bunshin. Listen to me when I'm talking to you, you cocky. Ooh, too slow. Jiraiya dodged two blows, knocking out a clone in the process. Dirty old man. Mind your own damn business, according to Orochimaru, Macarena. It's back. Tsunade and Jiraiya both gave the speaker the dirtiest looks they could manage, and the rest picked up on it, so that was pretty much the only negative response he could hear. When he returned, he got suspicious looks, even though entering the Leaf Village with two Sannin on either side essentially eliminated the need for Engarde Shinobi. Even though most people had forgotten about the demon brat once he was out of sight, it was no secret that he had disappeared. He was given another headband at Tsunade's office, along with a parole that Kakashi was supposed to review. Then, wondering if anything had changed in 2.5 years, he suggested that the two of them look into Root and that Jiraiya in particular start considering methods to get seals off of people. He then made his way to his apartment. He kind of hoped Hinata would be there, but she probably wouldn't have defeated him here, especially since he had traveled to Konoha on foot and defeated Danzo in a day. With all the Sannin, he was thorough. The use of his own shower, kitchen, which was empty except for some really old ramen, which he was going to eat but then gave up and dumped. He swore it wasn't just blasphemous waste. It looked sort of fuzzy, and bed, however, made for a restful night. It was still refreshing to be home. He infuriated Sasuke. Sakura was furious with him. Kakashi struck him, disregarding Hinata's previous action. They arrived at Choji's favorite barbecue after a spar, more like a beatdown. 3 against 1 was only okay if he was on the winning side, damn it. There, he happily listened to how Sakura had sneaked in an apprenticeship with Tsunade. Did you ask about me? Naruto pretended. We talked about you. We both agree you're an asshat. Sakura replied. Was half looking for you the entire time, the Uchiha admitted. I actually did see you. Twice. Naruto smirked and had to avoid a chopstick. Kakashi was silent but happy, his eye curving into a smile nearly the whole time, and the food on his plate vanished without any of them ever noticing him remove his mask. Iruka stopped by to slap Naruto with Kakashi's icha after removing it from his grasp. Don't hit me with porn. Kakashi managed to sound genuinely perplexed as he questioned, does it make a difference? You've already done it, anyway. With his fingers intertwined in front of his mouth, Sasuke nodded, giving the next statement a far more academic tone than it actually had. I suspected, but now I'm sure. What the hell did you do while you were away, you pervert? Sakura screamed like a harpy, snatched her teammate by the collar, and shook him after Naruto and Sakura blinked. Gods, Naruto said, blinking away the stars before his eyes, a faint throb in the back of his mind where Sakura had struck him during the fight beginning to resurface. Why did I even come back? He asked. Hinata was waving to Choji and another Chunin she didn't recognize as she walked the well-traveled path straight up to Konoha's main gate 4 days after Naruto left for his appointment. She hoped to drop off her copy of the Gutsy Ninja at Naruto's before leaving for home, but it was dusk and a little chilly. Sasuke yelled, Hinata, as she left the Hokage's office and headed back. In addition to being too small to accommodate a pair of sandals, the box felt nearly empty. I don't have any space for this at home while I'm painting my walls. Can you stick it in Naruto's apartment until I have space for it? Hinata, already burdened with a scroll that Tsunade had given her with the same justification, and a book of yaoi Sakura had pleaded with her to keep at Naruto's until she was done with it and could give it to the next girl, said, Oh, you're repainting? You should invite me and Naruto to come look at it when you're done. You know? The Uchiha asked as he effortlessly tucked the box under his arm. She handed him the book and smiled at his reaction when he saw the cover. Sakura gave me this. She said she kept her hands busy with the sealing scroll, saying, if Tsunade hadn't done the same thing with a sealing scroll, I would have bought it. Why don't you give that back to Sakura tomorrow, when your painting is done? She asked. With his face only faintly flushed, Sasuke turned back to her after putting the book in the box. If I do ever repaint my walls, it won't be while 2 of you are out of the village. If I'm ever drafted to paint your walls, I'm collecting every gay romance novel in Konoha and stashing it at your house, Hinata responded. I will burn them. Sasuke ended the sentence. Paint's pretty flammable, you really shouldn't. When they said their goodbyes at the crossroads, Hinata had 5 minutes to worry about her odor after going 2 days without a shower because she had to make sure her runaway didn't leave her. She didn't have to worry because Naruto was unconscious in his bed with a scroll unfolded across his face. When she arrived at the apartment after carefully taking it off and kissing his cheek, she went to wash. She was ensnared in Naruto's double-handed hold on her arms and legs when she woke up in the morning, and she could feel his leg hair scratching her calves. She tried to wriggle out and put on some coffee while huffing, but she woke him up and was squeezed even more tightly. Saying, good morning, he kissed her on the temple. She said, hey, wanting to give him a real one but also wanting to finish brushing her teeth. Let me go so I can make breakfast. Nah. Naruto then swung his leg across so he was on all fours over her, smiling, and she was resolutely pressing her lips together and breathing through her nose. So it was more of an extreme game than a wrestling match to see who would laugh and make the other recoil with their breath first before he could recover. She rolled away after tickling him. She was ecstatic to discover that the freezer contained microwavable cinnamon rolls. This was the first time she had had any during the mission. Was paradise, especially since they were accompanied by coffee and the sight of Naruto attempting to operate their new toaster while wearing boxers. He remarked, you have a frosting mustache, while he was eating bread. Sucking sugar from her fingers, she answered, if you want it to cook properly, you need to put it on the middle setting. He sneered over her and said, still have a frosting mustache, disregarding her advice. You still can't work a toast, she said, smiling as she purposefully licked the cream away. His tongue was in her mouth. Unrelated to the topic at hand, Naruto's kitchen table was surprisingly robust. Following that and the unpleasant realization that the only food in the house was cheese-flavored ramen, cinnamon rolls, pre-cooked hot dogs, and the toast that Naruto had eaten raw. The two of them went grocery shopping before having lunch at Ichiraku's. Next, they encountered Team 7. Every member of Team 7, you must be Sai, Naruto remarked, grinning broadly. Hello, Sai said, grinning back at him, dickless. Sakura blurted, that's just how Sai is, Naruto, adding, he gives people weird nicknames. Naruto parted his lips. I closed and nodded. Never let it be said that he lacked confidence. You don't talk as much as Drama Queen and Homely said you do, Sai said. Homely and Drama Queen snarled to his right. Naruto put his hands in his pockets and started to walk to Team 7's training field, asking, what's Hinata's nickname? Sai cheerfully answered, Tramp, because of her obsession with you. Naruto's eyes grew wide, changing from blue to red more quickly than before. With his clawed hand in a fist, he said slowly, say that again, Sai? She had apparently been worrying about the wrong thing. She said, no, really, it's just how he is, in the hopes of soothing the irate Jinchuriki. Surprisingly, only one punch had been delivered, but everyone had to watch as Sai was given an extraordinarily lengthy and in-depth lecture that broke down nicknames and when they should be used. Naruto grumbled, I get that, I just don't like how much crap you get because of me. Hinata's bangs were blown away from her face. Even if it was a big deal, I can handle Sai. Naruto no attacking Konoha nin. Sasuke appeared to be making every effort to acquire selective hearing, while Sai was behind them brainstorming new names for Sakura. I think his nickname for you is very inaccurate, she whispered into his ear, leaning on him for support and stretching onto her toes. If it helps, she said. A silly grin spread across his face. Yeah, In an attempt to diffuse the tension that had just arisen, she walked a little more quickly toward the middle of the field. She blushed when their eyes locked again and he continued to smile at her. Sakura crossed her arms and shifted her weight from side to side as she called, "Hey, Hinata. Dickless. Are we gonna spar or not?" Naruto shouted back, "What's her new nickname, Sai?" The pale boy exclaimed, "Banshee," and had to avoid the pink-haired girl's bone-shattering blow. "Oh, I thought manners dictated that the starts of spars be announced, so that no party was accidentally injured?" Sasuke said in a monotone, "She's a medic nin, she'll put you back together, so don't worry." A clone joined Naruto's former teammates with a hand signal to level the playing field, and the original moved to support the newcomer with a shake of her head. Hinata triggered her bloodline. She would never know how Naruto managed to keep up with them all.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.